One company can help your government manage hospital patients and help another government fight and win a war. Same company, same software, same billionaire that controls them both. The same guy that thinks that democracy and freedom are no longer compatible. The same guy that thinks that capitalism and freedom are also no longer compatible. And between those two, he's not sacrificing capitalism, that's for sure. The guy who hesitated when asked.
I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But
after he was accused of attacking the women's rights movement of the early 20th century, he said he wouldn't want to take the right to vote away from women because it's unlikely that voting will actually change anything. You probably don't want him anywhere near power.
I want to play for you one of the most chilling clips I've ever heard. And just hold on and trust me, because it's not that chilling until you realize what it means.
The basic idea was that we could never win an election on getting certain things because we were in such a small minority. But maybe you could actually unilaterally change the world without having to constantly convince people and beg people and plead with people who are never going to agree with you through a technological means. And this is where I think technology is this incredible alternative to politics.
That's tech billionaire and Republican megadonor Peter Thiel speaking at a Libertopia, a libertarian conference in 2010. He's basically saying that his political ideology is so unappealing that it'll never win elections. And that's one thing he's right about, because he's railed against women having the right to vote, complained so much about diversity, and written some really disgusting stuff about sexual assault and consent.
But what if I told you that he not only effectively controls the US government, but is slowly creating the nervous system of the West? But who is this guy? Peter Thiel grew up in apartheid Namibia in the 1970s when Hitler was still being openly venerated and celebrated. He expressed admiration for apartheid South Africa, claiming it worked and was economically sound. He was part of the original founders of PayPal, known as the PayPal Mafia, along with the likes of Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, and the founders of YouTube and Yelp, and was known as its leader. Thiel orchestrated a coup on Musk whilst the latter was on his honeymoon, replacing him as CEO. According to Musk, Thiel believes he is a sociopath, whilst Thiel considers Musk a fraud and a braggart. Thiel made over $55 million in the eBay acquisition. He did this by maxing out his Roth IRA, which is supposedly a vehicle for middle-class investing. He bought shares at an artificially low $0.001, or a tenth of a cent per share. His original $2,000 turned into upwards of $5 billion in less than 20 years, completely tax-free. He then went on to be the first investor in Facebook, giving him massive leverage and influence over society and netting him a very healthy return. An early look at his writings can tell us a lot of what we need to know. In his 1995 book, The Diversity Myth, he attacks the idea of multiculturalism and brands it as a mechanism of conformity that dilutes academic rigor and Western civilization. He described the campus environment as a multicultural authoritarianism. In his book 0 to 1, Thiel says that monopolies are superior to competition. Company dictatorships and single decision makers are superior to democratic governance. He promotes secret keeping in politics and shows explicit contempt for democracy by effectively shutting down hostile media companies mentioned later and supporting fringe and extreme platforms like Rumble. Thiel actively weakens the cathedral, which is the neo-reactionary term for the woke liberal elite that pushes the diversity myth such as the mainstream media, university system, Hollywood, etc. His philosophy is rooted in the concept that the liberal democratic order is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. The only salvation lies in what is known as the catechon, a theological concept of a restrainer that holds back chaos. To put it simply, he doesn't just want to supersede the government, he wants to become the government because he knows best. Democracy and governance is an impediment to order, innovation and technological progress. One of his main philosophical influences, the Nazi thinker Carl Schmitt, argues that true power lies not in the rule of law, but in the ability to suspend the law during a crisis. Thiel's movement rejects the liberal consensus of universal human rights and open markets in favor of strong borders, national sovereignty, and a competent elite. This is why he is particularly fond of a model nation, but we'll get onto that in a second. He said in a 2009 essay for the Cato Institute that I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. Democracy is an engine of stagnation and mob rule, one that inevitably leads to the redistribution of wealth and the suppression of the exceptional individual. To Thiel, his mission is to build the Catacon, to provide order in a dying world, and save Western civilization from the Armageddon and the Antichrist. No, I am not making this up.
Well, here's what's really wild to me. 4 parts. It's not just one. One lecture on the Antichrist would be insane. This guy's doing a series. He's doing a 4-part lecture on the Antichrist, and nobody in his inner orbit went, Peter, how about 1 lecture on the Antichrist or no lectures? Not 4.
Was that the Antichrist?
This is like me doing a 4-part lecture on Long Island racism. Just to show everybody, you know, how much I know about it and how scary it is and how we got to watch out for it. But it's totally not me or anyone I know. It's no one that's ever been in my backyard, but those others.
In his own lectures and talks, Thiel frequently mentions the Antichrist, not necessarily as the literal demonic figure, but as a metaphor for the chaos of the borderless, globalized world. If democracy is a mechanism for amplifying chaotic ideologies, such as populism, cancer culture, or woke ideology, then democracy is a danger to civilization. The Catacon must be a technological sovereign, something capable of total surveillance and decisive action, free from emotion or human biases. I mean, his and Elon Musk's vision of Mars was for a world free of limitations, where no one can tell you what to do.
I don't know, this is a conversation I had with Elon back in 2024, and we had all these, conversations. I had the seasteading version with Elon where I said, if Trump doesn't win, I want to just leave the country. And then Elon said, there's nowhere to go. Wow, Elon, you don't believe in going to Mars anymore. 2024 is the year where Elon stopped believing in Mars, not as a silly science tech project, but as a political project. Mars was supposed to be a political project. It was building an alternative. And in 2024, Elon came to believe that if you went to Mars, the socialist US government, the woke AI, it would follow you to Mars. It was the Demis meeting with Elon that we sort of brokered. He was doing DeepMind.
This is an AI company.
Yeah, this was the rough conversation was, Demis tells Elon, I'm working on the most important project in the world. I'm building a superhuman AI. And Elon responds to Demis, well, I'm working on the most important project in the world. I am turning us into interplanetary species. And then Demis said, well, my AI will be able to follow you to Mars. And then Elon sort of went quiet. But in my telling of the history, it took years for that to really hit Elon. If you concretize things, then maybe you realize that Mars is supposed to be more than a science project. It's supposed to be a political project. And then when you concretize it, you have to start thinking through, well, the woke AI will follow you, the socialist government will follow you.
In his own words, the fate of our world may depend on the effort of a single person who builds or propagates the machinery of freedom, one which makes the world safe for capitalism. That is what he wants, and as we saw earlier, his version of capitalism explicitly calls for the end of democracy and the dominance of monopolies. So how is he creating the Catacon? Well, let's have a look at his track record. Thiel was the first investor in Facebook, an early investor in SpaceX. He invested in Stripe, Airbnb, Spotify, Neuralink, DeepMind, and so much more, with just one of his funds having over $22 billion in assets under management. And this is all because Thiel has stated he sees technological investment as a form of political intervention. This is where Palantir comes in, named after the Seeing Stones in the Lord of the Rings series, which allows wizards to survey and monitor the Earth. Palantir is the digital manifestation of the Catacon. Palantir is a data company Thiel set up to solve a specific problem. US agencies have vast amounts of data scattered across random systems and databases. Palantir would take the effort of fusing them all together, generating clean and usable lists and software, particularly for intelligence agencies. It was funded initially by the CIA's venture capital arm, and was designed to apply the fraud detection algorithms of PayPal to the domain of counterterrorism. This was, after all, in 2003, in the wake of 9/11 and the so-called War on Terror. Over the next 2 decades, it has evolved from a niche analytics firm into the operating system for Western security, embedding itself so deeply in government functions that it has become virtually irremovable.
But he knows that he can use technology as a unilateral alternative to politics, and that should really freak you out. Thiel is one of the co-founders and biggest investors in Palantir, a CIA-funded technology company that has contracts across the government for their data software. Here's their CFO speaking a few years ago.
We continue to advance our mission of becoming the U.S. government's central operating system as we extend our footprint across defense, healthcare, and civilian agencies.
And while both President Obama and Biden did sign Palantir contracts, President Trump is taking it way further.
Palantir's core product comprises of two main platforms, Gotham and Foundry. They do not create data, but ingest the massive amounts of data that these departments held for decades without use, and fuses them into a single, coherent, navigable model that government employees can then access. Palantir was commissioned by the Department of Homeland Security to create Immigration OS, which is effectively the operating system for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE. Yes, that's ICE. They received a new $30 million contract to create the operating system. Palantir used data from federal, state, and commercial sources, such as employment records and even phone logs, to track immigrants and were the primary reason behind these aggressive deportations. ICE agents can map and locate immigrants, track their social networks of family and friends. It tracks voluntary departures from the US, visa overstays, and targets for deportations. ICE states that Palantir is the sole source capable of delivering the system quickly. Palantir has led to illegal family separation, wrongful arrests of US citizens, and deportations to countries where they face torture, all whilst allowing ICE to work with minimal transparency. In May 2025, Palantir began integration into the IRS, organizing and analyzing data on the over 150 million American taxpayers. They also signed a predictive criminal program with the New Orleans police back in 2012, in secret. Palantir said it was a gift to the city, which meant that it could bypass the city council, public debate, and standard procurement process, all done without any public knowledge. Palantir used social network analysis and data sources to generate gang member scorecards and generate targets for the police, and was later picked up by the Chicago and LAPD, amongst other cities. It's no surprise that their predictive policing has disproportionately suggested black men. It was a positive feedback loop. The algorithm would suggest a list of people they'd be subject to increased police scrutiny, naturally leading to more arrests, feeding the algorithm even more. Palantir isn't limited to just civil agencies. In 2024, the US Army designated Palantir as the prime contractor for the Titan program, or the Tactical Intelligence Targeting Access Node, a battlefield system designed to connect sensors to shooters in real time. Palantir's Maven Smart system is now also the central nervous system for the US Army targeting, using AI to generate a list of targets. With what we know about Thiel and his opinions, do we trust him to effectively control the software that the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, IRS, ICE, FBI, NSA, USDA, and so many more agencies use? This man, who donates to white nationalist and far-right groups and projects. He also invested almost $2 million in the Sea Stealing Institute to develop floating cities free from government regulations and taxation. In the 2018 Bloomberg profile titled Palantir Knows Everything About You, the company explicitly markets itself as targeting American citizens using war on terror tools. Thiel has often stated that surveillance systems require centralized data architecture existing outside the balances of representative democracy. Thiel's influence isn't just limited to the United States, the most powerful country in history. He's expanding his influence into other countries, especially in Europe. The National Health Service of the UK, or the NHS, is the world's largest publicly funded healthcare system, holding complete records of every individual in Britain from the day they were born until the day they die. This kind of information is worth billions to private companies, around £10 billion annually. It has been largely locked away from the private sector though, until now. Palantir was awarded a £330 million contract to create a federated data platform for the NHS, effectively allowing Palantir to become the operating system for the NHS. This came after Palantir was given the COVID-19 data store contract in early 2020, supposedly just for £1, but the government later paid it $35 million, allowing Palantir to embed the software deep into the NHS early on. The rollout has been a failure in many trusts, with staff describing the system as convoluted, retrograde, and a step backward from existing systems. As if that wasn't bad enough, two senior NHS officials, Harjeet Dhaliwal and Indra Joshi, transitioned to Palantir in 2022. Definitely not suspicious. Palantir has also secured trials or contracts with multiple police authorities, such as the London Metropolitan, Bedfordshire, Greater Manchester, Merseyside, and Cheshire Police. Palantir's Nectar integrates very sensitive information, such as criminal history, mental health records, substance abuse records, relationship data, financial records, health records, political affiliation, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, and much more. They've also secured contracts with Barnsley and Coventry councils. Think of the kind of power and influence this one man and his company now have over a foreign government. Once governments lock into their software, they effectively can't leave. As the financial analysis firm Hargreaves Lansdown said, once customers are ensnared in the Palantir world, it's very hard to give up the data insights and get out of its web. Thiel's influence over the UK should be very worrying. Lord Peter Mandelson, confidant and advisor of former Prime Minister Tony Blair, who comes up a lot on this story for some reason, as well as the British ambassador to the US, runs a lobbying firm called Global Counsel, which lists Palantir as a client and likely helped him land that NHS contract. Tony Blair also runs the Tony Blair Institute, or TBI, arguably the most powerful think tank in Britain, due to its close direct ties to the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the amount of influence they have had over policy. The TBI has close links to Thiel and is also heavily funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars by Larry Ellison, who's a big Thiel ally. The TBI has also consistently produced policy papers in support of the idea of NHS centralisation, exactly what Palantir is now doing. Thiel's influence isn't just limited to the Labour Party. On the day Boris Johnson illegally prorogued Parliament in 2019, him and his advisor Dominic Cummings met Thiel at 10 Downing Street, a meeting which was not entered into official logs for some reason. One of the main ways that Thiel got his contracts in the Labour Party is through a not very well known man called Jeffrey Epstein. They first met in 2014, long after his initial conviction of sex trafficking and rape. Epstein served as one of Thiel's contact points into the UK. He further had a contract facilitated by Chief of MI6, Sir John Sawers. This has allowed Thiel to secure further contracts with the Royal Navy, Border Patrol, many local police authorities, and the Ministry of Defence. And once more, no one knows about this. This was not debated. This was not put for a vote. Councillors and MPs did not involve their constituents. The people have had no way of stopping this. This is forced surveillance, and people will have no idea if they were arrested because an algorithm said so. And if you think that you are fine for now because you're not in the UK or US, think again, because everything I covered is either coming to you or is already in Germany, Denmark, Australia, Canada, and France, the Netherlands, Spain, and more. Here's the scary part. We know basically nothing about how Thiel uses our own data, which he uses to track and surveil us. When freedom of information requests were made both in the US and the UK, US government agencies have cited both law enforcement and national security exemptions to avoid disclosing information. UK police forces have refused to confirm or deny the use of Palantir technology, claiming national security exemptions, and NHS leadership has redacted large portions of Palantir contracts. Whilst we can see his influence spreading to the West, there is one nation which he effectively envisions as the model country for his policy applications. You may or may not be surprised to hear which country it is. Palantir's first ever board meeting outside the United States was held in early 2024. It took place in their Tel Aviv offices in Israel, on Rothschild Boulevard, 9 years after the office was opened. Thiel is a massive investor in Israeli defense and surveillance startups, setting up an entire venture fund exclusively for Israeli startups called Mithril Capital. He's particularly linked to members of Israel's Unit 8200, the IDF's elite intelligence unit akin to the Israeli NSA. One of his biggest investments was into the Israeli startup Carbine, which allows emergency dispatchers to access the camera and microphone of callers, as well as their location, without needing permission or consent. It was actually founded by former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and received great investment from, again, Jeffrey Epstein. Thiel's fund was the first US firm to invest in Carbine, and it was likely that same tech that is being used in the system Palantir gave to police officers in New Orleans, LA, Chicago, and other American cities. They used Israeli spyware that captured every single point of interaction with regular people and could even be used to spy on average citizens. Another Israeli startup that Thiel invested in is Dream Security, specializing in AI and defense tech. It was set up by Sebastian Kurz, former Chancellor of Austria, known as Austria's mini Trump, the man who resigned amidst corruption charges, as well as Shalev Julio, founder of the NSO Group. The NSO Group is known for creating the software Pegasus, the military-grade spyware hired by foreign countries to hack into anyone's phone. It was so dangerous that the NSO Group was blacklisted by the US. That's how bad it was. Thiel also secretly invested into Boldent, a direct competitor to Pegasus. He really wants to be able to hack your phone. Another linked Israeli company, Smart Shooter, who manufactured electro-optical sights that attach on assault rifles. It uses AI image processing to identify and lock onto targets, including moving drones or people. It's already being used in both Gaza and the West Bank, the latter of which supposedly is under a peace agreement with Israel, yet still has Israeli soldiers in it. And it also quadrupled Israel's lethality in Gaza. Extend is another Israeli drone company that specializes in human-guided AI for close-quarters combat. 5,000 drones have been ordered by the IDF for use in urban areas in Gaza and Lebanon, allowing drones to enter rooms and kill people quickly, oftentimes civilians. SOC Defense, a German entity linked to Extend, was also funded by Thiel and is the European equivalent. Epitome is a platform that analyzes debates and conversations using AI for the Israeli intelligence and financial institutions. It is founded by Joab Rosenberg, former commander of the Israeli military program Talpiot, which is credited for Israel's military tech dominance. Israeli cybersecurity expert Isaac Ben Israel and former national security Yaakov Amidror sit on the advisory board of Episteme. It's not just Israeli startups that Thiel invests in, even though he does have a soft spot for Israel. He invests in any company which promotes his vision of total surveillance and authoritarianism. Thiel has invested almost $10 million in Clearview AI, which scraped billions of images from the internet and social media without consent to create faceprints for 20 billion records. It enables real-time facial identification and targeting and primarily serves law enforcement, especially ICE. But it can also be used against protesters, immigrants, and political opponents. Its deployment has expanded massively under Trump's second term. Founders Tontat and Johnson openly stated that their mission is building algorithms to ID all the illegal immigrants for the deportation squads. But of course, there is nothing that stops them from using it against you. Thiel now has access to that level of identification just with pictures. Thiel has also funded Neros, a drone startup which explicitly positions itself as the American counterpart to the Chinese giant DJI. It's been used for autonomous drones in the Ukrainian and American militaries. And most worryingly of all, Anduril Industries, founded by Thiel's protege and Oculus founder, Palmer Luckey, and funded by Thiel, is the hardware version of Palantir. Anduril's main product is Lattice, an AI-powered operating system which connects sensors, drones, and defense systems into a single autonomous network. This powers their sentry towers, which are deployed along the US-Mexico border for ICE, and can detect, track, and classify migrants too. Anduril also creates AI-powered autonomous kamikaze drones, being tested by the US Air Force and actively deployed in Ukraine. Modular surveillance drones used by the UK and US militaries for reconnaissance. An AI-piloted jet interceptor designed to destroy incoming drones and missiles, as well as submarines, and this is all being backed by billions in funding and is valued at $30 billion. Its explicit company mission is to save Western civilization, exactly what Thiel yaps on about. There are honestly hundreds of examples I can use. I mean, the guy has multiple funds for investing in defense and surveillance tech. As I mentioned, he's got one entire fund just for Israeli investments. But just from these few companies mentioned, think of the stack of companies Thiel can now use. Carbine, Pegasus, and Dream Security for accessing, controlling, and recording your devices, such as phones, cameras, and microphones. Smart Shooter can lock weapons and potentially drones onto people and other drones. Clearview can identify and track people just from a single image. Neros and Extend can build autonomous AI-powered drones for warfare, Anduril can combine them all into one physical network, and Palantir, which is the brains or operating system behind it all. Here we can see how he uses his investments. Thiel has had a central and key role in the genocide in Gaza. Larry Ellison's Oracle and Peter Thiel's Palantir signed a strategic partnership to deliver AI solutions to the Israeli military. This came in the form of AI tools like the Gospel and Lavender. Lavender is an AI which used machine learning to generate a list of 37,000 potential targets, with tens of thousands more after they lowered the threshold, but the system has a 90% error rate in some applications. These lists of targets were completely generated by AI, and were not approved by humans. The AI assigns a civilian collateral amount, which for junior militants was up to 20 civilians, with over 100 civilians for more senior militants. The junior members would then also be bombed with unguided dumb bombs, as they were cheaper. To reiterate, the AI allowed the killing of 20 civilians for a single junior militant, bearing in mind that the US only gave Osama bin Laden a civilian collateral limit of 13. Lavender has struck hospitals, schools, and refugee camps, purely based on algorithmic designations of suspicious rooftops. Another Israeli AI system, which was given the dystopian name Where's Daddy, tracked militants and bombed them in their homes, along with their wife and kids. Often, the militant wasn't even inside the house they bombed. One Israeli source said, "It happened to me many times that we attacked a house, but the person wasn't even home." One source said, "The result is that you killed an entire family for no reason." This is one of the main reasons that genocide was so deadly. Almost 700,000 deaths by some estimates, or almost a third of the entire population. Wiped out. Almost all civilians. And it was all delivered and caused by Thiel. Palantir CEO Alex Karp said, "We are very well known in Israel. Israel appreciates our product." Trump's plan for a post-war Gaza was also generated by the Tony Blair Institute. Yes, they're rearing their disgusting heads again. The plan's foundation rests on the surveillance technology owned and operated by Thiel and Larry Ellison. They will rely on a unified digital identity and biometric registry for every Gazan resident, which won't be hard as Israel already controls the ID numbers and population registry of every Palestinian, both in the West Bank and Gaza already. Think of the kind of authoritarian surveillance that Israel subjects Palestinians in the West Bank to, but even worse, as unlike in the West Bank, it's all one solid area. On top of that, Gaza also doesn't have a friendly government in its midst, like the PA in the West Bank. The TBI wants to replace the governing body of Gaza, not with the PA, but a technocratic board of international figures, which is official talk for an oligarchy favourable to Trump and Israel, and who will turn Gaza into a testing ground for their new technologies. It will supposedly be led by Trump and at some point was to be led by Tony Blair himself. Imagine not a smart city, but a smart prison that is completely occupied by outside powers, where every movement is tracked and recorded by private companies and controlled by a country that practices apartheid and genocide, all led by someone who says it's pretty much necessary to have conflict of interest. In the illegally occupied West Bank, the IDF runs an extremely sophisticated surveillance ecosystem designed to monitor, track, control, and even blackmail the Palestinians. A massive database called the Wolfpack contains biometric data, family histories, security ratings, and movement logs of virtually every single Palestinian in the West Bank. The strategic partnership between Palantir and the Israeli Ministry of Defense signed in 2024 allows the IDF to apply predictive policing logic, arresting Palestinians not for crimes committed, but crimes the algorithm predicts they might commit. A mobile app is available for IDF soldiers called Blue Wolf, which allows Israeli soldiers to scan faces and retrieve any relevant information from Wolfpack, coded with green, yellow, or red on whether or not to arrest or detain them. Soldiers even compete to capture the most photos of Palestinians to populate the database, including children. Red Wolf refers to the biometric scanners at checkpoints that scan faces automatically, all across the West Bank. Thiel admires and looks up to Israel as a model to emulate. When questioned at Cambridge Union in 2024 regarding his use of AI killing in Gaza and the massive civilian death toll, he said his bias is to defer to Israel and that the IDF is broadly in the right. Thiel thinks that Israel already is the Catacon or has it, a besieged outpost of Western civilization fighting against chaotic and barbaric forces.
He doesn't disavow his black heritage, but it's the Jewish side that is of paramount interest to him now. He is a staunch supporter of Israel. Palantir has worked with the Mossad going back a decade now. And after October 7th, Karp said, we are going to give Israel all the help it needs, no questions asked. A company took out a full-page ad in the New York Times about a week after the October 7th massacre and said Palantir stands with Israel, and so it has.
What we see in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories is what he wants to run in every country possible, particularly the United States and Europe. That's what he does with his companies. For example, Smart Shooter got investment from Thiel. It then was deployed in Gaza and the West Bank, getting better with use, or in other words, shooting unarmed protesters in the West Bank and Gaza, and then expanded to America, securing many Department of Defense contracts. Make no mistake, most of these startups could not have gone this far or even survived that Thiel. This is what he does, invest in surveillance tech, test them out on Palestinians, and then copy and paste that into America and other countries, marketing it as having battle-proven capability. And if you think his actions are limited to Israel, you are severely mistaken. He is already tracking and listening to the phone calls of Americans, especially to those of Palestinian descent. But tracking an American is tracking an American. There's nothing stopping him from listening in to any other American's calls. According to Snowden documents, he's working with the NSA and then sending those calls over to Israeli intelligence. Thiel supports political movements and parties fighting the liberal consensus and creating favourable environments for his business interests, as well as allowing him to increase his influence. One of the startups he funded is called Urbit, run by Curtis Yarvin, who says that the US government needs a hard reset and needs to be run like a corporation with a CEO monarch who is accountable only to shareholders, not the electorate. He advocates the elimination of the constitution and rule of law, mass termination of civil servants and public institutions, and abolition of free press. Thiel has funded disruptor candidates like Blake Masters, who disrupted the established order and pushed for the dismantling of the administrative state, especially with Elon Musk's Doge. Thiel even mentored his most successful student in the ways of Silicon Valley finance, then donated a record-breaking $15 million to his 2022 Senate campaign. His most successful mentee, Vice President J.D. Vance. Yes, his influence extends that high. J.D. Vance is everything Thiel wants in a politician. Isolationist in foreign policy rhetoric, but strongly committed to the military-industrial complex. Hostile to the so-called administrative state, but eager to wield state power against political enemies. Prospera was a libertarian utopian concept city that claimed to want ultra-low taxes, regulations, and even private courts in Honduras. It was funded by Thiel and investors like Mark Andreessen, but was deemed unconstitutional. So what did the Trump administration do? Threaten sanctions on Honduras and pardon the former president who helped the legal framework for freedom cities like Prospera. What was he charged for? A small crime of importing 500 tons of cocaine into the US. He was due to face 45 years in prison, but got pardoned by Trump, all because Thiel and his billionaire friends wanted it to go through. Thiel is also heavily pushing for Trump to take Greenland, all in a bid to expand the concept of freedom cities there, building a city called Praxis. That's just a snippet of Thiel's influence on the Trump administration and his relationship to its people, primarily J.D. Vance. Vance was also the former principal at Thiel's Mithril Capital, which was the fund that only invested in Israeli startups. Thiel's connection to Sebastian Kurz, former Chancellor of Austria, provides Thiel with access to the European Council leadership and wealthy Middle Eastern monarchies. He's also used to normalize Thiel's work and bridge that gap between European conservatism and the radical new right. Thiel has backed far-right parties in Europe, such as the Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD, in Germany. It's a party so extremely far-right that even the French far-right National Rally of Marine Le Pen ruled out a coalition with them due to how extreme they are. Thiel gave his speech for the AfD in Munich, and the PayPal mafia's Elon Musk also boosted their messaging on Twitter, as well as speaking there and spreading misinformation about them, all to boost their popularity. Vance and Thiel also have openly promoted Viktor Orban and his dismantling of Hungarian democracy. Thiel and JD Vance also both invested in Rumble, which is just conspiracy and far-right YouTube. Thiel secretly funded a lawsuit against Gorka, which consistently critiqued him and even outed him for being gay. The lawsuit ended up bankrupting the company, which he did just out of spite and in an attempt to silence criticism and opposing views. Thiel also pressured Zuckerberg to allow politicians to spread misinformation on Facebook, particularly helping Republicans. He was also basically the only Silicon Valley figure to publicly back Trump in 2016, speaking at the RNC and donating millions. Thiel was also a major investor and board member of Cambridge Analytica, the consulting firm that conducted mass surveillance micro-targeting of voters for both the 2016 presidential election as well as the Brexit vote. He then served as an advisor to Trump on tech and national security issues. He served on the 2016 Transition Committee and in 2025 vetted appointees for roles in defense, intelligence, and science. These included roles in the FTC, Pentagon, Department of Commerce, National Security Council, and many more departments. He even created a list of 150 ultra-reactionary figures for top government positions. And he set up meetings between Trump and Thiel's network of CEOs.
15 years ago, Peter Thiel, like the supervillain in a movie explaining his plan to the hero, admitted that he can use technology to get his ideas across when they're unpopular, completely subverting democracy. And today, one of his technology companies is gaining more and more power within the government, building the very systems our government relies on. And oh yeah, this is the CEO.
The central risk to Palantir and America and the world is a regressive way of thinking that is corrupting and corroding our institutions, that calls itself progressive, but actually, and is called woke, but is actually a form of a thin pagan religion.
If you're a progressive, if you have progressive values, meaning you just, care about other people, the CEO of the company building America's technological back end thinks of you as the central risk. He thinks of you as the enemy. Are these the people you want running the systems you rely on, or worse, the systems that surveil you?
People are worried about turning into China, but Peter Thiel idolizes a nation in which does far worse. Scratch that, he doesn't just idolize it, he actively arms it and facilitates its insanely authoritarian surveillance. He is the reason it is so authoritarian. Plus, unlike China, the Israeli form of surveillance is coming to your doorstep.
To literally know what you're thinking, what you fear, what you want, your desires, all of these things, having all your data, knowing everything you do, knowing how fast your heart is beating. You know, all these wearable things that you have that are transmitting frequencies to, someplace where all of your health data is being stored. That's what bothers a lot of people. It's what bothers people about this Palantir thing.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday.
Yeah.
The Palantir thing is very odd.
A lot of people feel that this is the precursor to a social credit score, a digital kind of police state. And that it's being done under the guise of security, that you will be safer.
Which is what the Patriot Act was brought through with.
That's exactly right.
It's always the case. It's always the case. They always sneak it in like, you got to be safe.
He is coming for you and your loved ones. Your name may very well be on the next Wolfpack database, which started in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, but is soon coming to your country. He has made his intentions clear. He has spent years building up his political and financial connections, and now he is pursuing those policies with his companies, carrying them out in Israel as a test run for the Western world.
It's so strange to have this, you build military AI, military drone, autonomous drone technology to export to war zones all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
You build domestic surveillance technology to surveil our friends and neighbors. And then your other pet passion is the Antichrist. It's odd. Wouldn't you include tennis? Wouldn't you go, and I'm big into tennis? Something else. It's odd, and I like ice fishing. I build autonomous drone technology. I build domestic surveillance technology.
And I love lake trout.
And I love lake trout, and I love big mouth bass fishing.
Yeah.
But instead, he goes, and I've also developed quite a keen interest in Satan. And I'd love to talk to everyone about it for 4 fucking things in San Francisco.
What is the plan with J.D. Vance?
Well, here's a little sampling of what they have in mind. Okay. Trump gets shot in the ear in July 2024. Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and Peter Thiel call Trump, and they say you have to pick J.D. Vance, or else the neocons might really kill you next year. Weird timing, weird thing to say. So Trump chooses J.D. Vance the following week at the RNC to be his vice president. Very weird. Why? Because J.D. Vance is a freshman senator who is 2 years into his term. So he's a private citizen. In 2022, he's elected to the Senate. 2024, he's the vice president of the United States of America. How does a person rise so quickly? Well, the backing of little tech. These disruptive defense tech companies like Palantir, Anduril, OpenAI, X, Tesla, the PayPal mafia, this group of billionaires, he's their guy, and they bought Trump. They fundraised for Trump to get Trump to pick him. Okay, so Trump wins the election. J.D. Vance has to leave the Senate to run for vice president. So this opens up a Senate seat in Ohio. And J.D. Vance was the senator there, so he's got a lot of influence. Well, who do they want to run in Ohio now as the governor of the state? Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Vivek's competition in the Republican Party, who was going to run for governor, I think it's lieutenant governor, he was appointed to replace J.D. Vance in the Senate. You see? So J.D. Vance leaves the Ohio Senate seat to be VP. Trump and Vance, using their political capital, steer the lieutenant governor into that Senate seat to take him out of the running for governor. Now Vivek Ramaswamy has a clear shot. Vivek Ramaswamy is a Yale Law School colleague of J.D. Vance's. Vivek Ramaswamy was a big booster with little tech behind the Trump campaign. You know where Anduril is going to open up their drone company, their drone factories? In the state of Ohio. Anduril is run by Palmer Luckey, who is given a second chance by Peter Thiel. He's tight with J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance steered Peter Thiel's money into Anduril when he was working for Peter Thiel's venture capital company. You see how all this works? So Vance is VP. Vivek is going to be the governor of Ohio. And they're going to give Anduril favorable jurisdiction to open up their big drone factory with the government contracts from the Department of War. And they're going to do it in Ohio, where their guy is now running the state. This is how that kind of corruption works. Now, when J.D. Vance, well, this is their plan. When he becomes the president of the United States, they're going to give. You think AI is at a productivity boom right now? Wait until the U.S. military gets involved. The U.S. government is all in on the AI race against China. It's going to change everything in the economy, everything in the defense sector. It's going to change how wars are fought. Who is going to be the beneficiary of all that investment, all those government contracts? It's going to be whoever is friends with the president of the United States after the next election. So if J.D. Vance gets in, it's going to be Palantir, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp. It's going to be Anduril, Palmer Luckey. It's going to be OpenAI, Sam Altman. It's going to be Grok, Elon Musk, Tesla with their robots. That's the end goal. So it's really, one way you could look at it is a coup. This is their guy. They use Trump as a Trojan horse, or maybe another analogy, they let J.D. Vance draft behind him. And then once Trump is discarded as a lame duck, they'll anoint Vance. And then he's going to pour all these maybe trillions of dollars in value towards their companies, and they will become the new oligarchs of America. That's the end game.
You don't think Peter Thiel is the Antichrist?
He might be.
Thiel's own biographer, Max Strafkin, said it's bordering on fascism. He is so hostile to the idea of democracy, that's pretty scary when you consider the role companies that he's been involved in play. And Todd Fine, an academic historian of fascism, said Peter Thiel represents extreme danger. As an intellectual historian of fascism and 20th century ideology, I warn that exaggeration is hardly even possible.